Here we go. Welcome back to State of the Division, and UFC 330 has arrived. A decent undercard packed with some heavy-handed fighters and two interesting title fights, Dern and Robertson both squaring off, followed by Makhachev and Garry. So let's go ahead and jump right into it to see if the UFC comes back from its month off with another solid card. But first, the housekeeping. I squeezed out 8 correct predictions on the last card, 6 being wrong, fortunately most of those errors coming on the main card. That does bring me to 36 and 23 with a number of late cancellations I've since given up on counting. And for the Butcher's Bill, there's only 2 at the time of recording. Blanchfield and Tobias have their fight rebooked and pulled from the card due to a Blanchfield injury, and Jeff Neal leaves the card for a reason I didn't see, being replaced by Joel Alvarez. Kicking it off, 13-4-1 Jeremiah Wells goes for 2 in a row against 6T2-1 Orolbai. Orolbai is 11 years younger at 28, 1 inch taller, with a draw and reach. Wells comes in looking like a grinder with some finish ability, his last 2 wins being by decision, but his first 3 in the UFC all came by finish. Being said, he does work a solid ground game at 3.06 with takedowns in all but 2 of his UFC fights. With those is a submission threat and ability to hold some solid ground control time. He has also given up a similar amount of control time in some fights. Striking is okay, but does speak to his focus on the ground. 2.35 to 1.28, being able to keep pace but never getting that far ahead. Orolbai is similar in style but has been more successful in terms of results, rocking an 8.77 takedown average, being able to stack them for solid chunks of control time that strangle his opponent's offense. Number is being inflated by a 19 takedown performance against Chris Curtis. Striking is very similar to Wells, a 2.78 to 2.70, relying on his ground game to slow it down and hold control since he seems to struggle when the pace begins to pick up. Orolbai is the heavy favorite here, and I will agree. I do think that Wells poses a threat with his ability to shoot takedowns, and if Orolbai gives up control, I think this fight can swing the other way. But as a whole, Orolbai is the larger threat on the feet, packing a lot more power, plus having the ability to stack takedowns in high quantities, giving him overall more avenues to victory when compared to Wells. 31-14, the Haitian sensation Neil Magny hunts for the finish against the equally dangerous 13-6 Brahimaj. Brahimaj is 6 years younger, 5 inches shorter, with 8 inches of reach in favor of Magny. Magny is a kill or be killed finisher, capable of landing power to flatline his opponent or find the submission. A bit streaky, but not too unusual for a kill or be killed fighter. In the striking, he does roll in with a 3.40 to 2.44, speaking to both how low his totals tend to be and the fact that he's willing to exchange early and often. This can get him caught, but lets him bring his power to the forefront. He does also work a 2.17 takedown average, and it helps him slow the fights down and grind if the game plan rolls that way. Brahimaj is much more submission focused, with 4 of his 5 UFC wins coming by submission. With that is then a 1.99 takedown average, speaking to its consistency in his fight. He has also proven the ability to shift positions or work defensively to sink a submission. In the striking, he works a grappler standard, 2.29 to 3.27, where he will cede the striking lead in order to secure a takedown and anchor it down on the ground. Close fight with Vegas giving the nod to Brahimaj, and I think I've convinced myself to agree. I was leaning Magny for a minute. Brahimaj does have the ability to match up with Magny on the feet and can survive Magny's takedowns and pose a submission threat. Now, Magny isn't out of this fight and has a definite shot at winning. He just has relied on takedowns a lot as of late. I think Brahimaj has a good chance to answer in both phases of the game. Ending off the early prelims, assuming I got this order right, 14-2 Rafael Bipolar Tobias takes the cage against the 13-3 Luque Fernando. Tobias is 6 years younger, 1 inch shorter, with 6 inches of reach, rolling over to Fernando. Tobias is fairly new and is coming into a second actual UFC fight. He looks to be a finisher with a career record 5 KO, 6 submission, and 3 decision wins. In the UFC, his only real success has come off the ground game with a submission win in the Contender Series and 2 takedowns and a submission attempt in his actual fight, which he lost. In that fight, he was outpaced severely in the striking with a 94-39 ratio. Outside the UFC, he was able to find success on the feet, so maybe it will come back. Fernando is coming into his first actual UFC fight, and outside the UFC, he looks like he has a finishing touch. His only loss have come by decision, with Cesar Almeida being able to match his ground control time without much of a takedown game in that fight. Fernando is the recipient of the Vegas nod here, and I guess I'm agreeing based on the lack of a whole lot of UFC numbers and overall record for these 2 fighters. So I'm going to put my faith in the money men in Vegas and go with Fernando here. I think Tobias has a shot, but he just hasn't put up an amazing performance in kind of the actual UFC run so far. And while Fernando is coming off a loss, Tobias is as well. So I'm going to put my faith in Vegas, going with Fernando here. On to the prelims. 24-12-1 Vicente, Silent Assassin Luque, takes on the 6-4 Mr. Vicious, Trescian Gore. Gore is 2 years younger, single inch taller with a dead draw in reach. Luque is a kill-or-be-killed fighter with a penchant for submissions, but some equally heavy hands. Does only have a .89 takedown average, which speaks to both how he's able to take control or get his submissions going in scrambles or flipping position. He can be controlled, but the few instances I saw really seem to be outliers. Striking is odd, 4.80 to 5.24, speaking to both his power as an equalizer and his durability. He is outpaced with some consistency in fights that go longer, but as mentioned, there are tools that he has to work around it. Gore's another submission-focused fighter, but does seem to have struggled more with some of the striking. 3.41 to 7 on the feet, with only 2 of his 7 fights seeing him lead the striking totals. With that, the ground matters much more with a 1.91 takedown average and takedowns in each of his 3 wins. This is another close one here, with Gore being the favorite. Very narrow favorite, that is, and I will be agreeing. Luque is always dangerous and does pose a submission threat, but has struggled when taken down, which is something that Gore uses heavily in his wins, as well as a consistent submission threat, which in the end I think tips the odds ever so slightly in his favor. If this fight stays on the feet, I think Luque takes it, but I think this fight eventually goes to the ground, and if it does, I think Gore poses the biggest danger there unless Luque manages to flip position. 8-0 Dante Lockjaw Johnson looks to stay perfect against the 11-4-1 Eric McConico. Johnson is 9 years younger at 27, 4 inches taller with 3 inches of reach, going to McConico. Johnson is rolling into fight number 4, or his 3rd actual UFC fight not counting Contender Series, and so far it looks to be a finisher with a preference for the striking, but some submission ability, one of those on record. Striking is solid, 3.11 to 2 flat, with only his most recent fight going over 40 total significant strikes. There is also a 2 flat takedown average, but is entirely based on his second fight where he landed 3 takedowns. McConico seems like a grinder with some KO touch, both his UFC wins coming by decision and both losses by KO. He does have a bit of a grinder standard with a 2.92 to 3.05 in the striking, where he is consistently fairly close together with the numbers even when getting outpaced. Behind that is a somewhat ineffective ground game, a 0.64 average with some use to help slow the fight down, but very limited control time. Vegas likes Johnson in this fight, and being boring, I'm going to agree. Johnson just appears to have a more dangerous ground game, which McConico seems to lack, while also being slightly more heavy-handed in the striking and being able to absorb less punishment when compared to McConico. In the end, more boxes just get ticked for Johnson when you compare them side by side than they do for McConico. Could McConico find a way to win? Probably, but looking at it like this, I like the odds favoring Johnson just a bit more. 15-9 Jalen Tarantula Turner goes against the 11-2 Kaue the Lumberjack Fernandes. Even age, either 3 inches of height or 6 in favor of Turner, with 4 inches of reach, also going to Turner. Turner rolls in as a kill or be decision sort of fighter, working with heavy hands and a very quick pace. 5.79 to 4.54, speaking to both that pace and the power he pulls on to end it quick. Does tend to take heavy striking lead in his wins, and while he keeps it close in the losses, most of them do find him being slowed down in some way. In that, we see a 0.75 takedown average as a situational and matchup piece, with a 75% takedown defense seeming a bit more important. Fernandes is a finisher as well, working with a fairly dynamic and explosive style, a 4.28 to 1.42, speaking to a quick pace and ability to end it early. Does carry a 1.18 takedown average with takedowns into 1 of his wins with a 76% takedown defense, which might matter a little more on this fight given that in his UFC losses, Diakisi was able to take control with 3 takedowns for 8 minutes of ground control time. Vegas has it close but does give the edge to Turner in this fight, but I will be gambling here and going with Fernandes. Both fighters have the KO touch, and Turner has the UFC experience edge, which normally I run with. My reason for going with Fernandes here is the slight fact that he can shoot takedowns, and if Turner is taken down, he can struggle. On the feet, it's fairly even, coming down to pace and the looming KO touch, which feels close to 50-50. Not to mention that as of late, we've seen Turner be a bit streakier, winning and losing in turn, and he is coming off a win. That's a bit more superstition on my part, but I think Fernandes has enough in his toolkit to win this fight, and with 2 finishers going at it, you can kind of go 50-50 on it. Getting us out of the prelims, 25-12-0-1 Chidi Bang Bang Njokuani takes on late replacement 23-4 Joel El Fenomeno Alvarez. Alvarez is 4 years younger, 1 inch shorter or dead even in height, with 3 inches of reach, going to Njokuani. Njokuani is coming off a rough patch, but looks to be a striker with some serious power, but also has been more so a grinder as of recent. A 5.16 to 3.32, speaking to his pace and ability to keep it up across 3 rounds. His last finish coming in 2022. 0.2. It seems like he can be slowed down by the ground game with a 0.0 takedown average and a 75% takedown defense, most of his losses seeing him being taken down for chunks of control. Alvarez is more so a consistent finisher, being able to get it done on the feet or with submissions. A 4.53 to 3.03 in the striking, speaking to a general quick starter nature with 4 of his 8 UFC wins ending in the first. He does only have a 0.18 takedown average, which does seem to show he's willing to work off his back or deploy them defensively. The favorite is Alvarez, and being boring, I'm going to agree again. Alvarez has just been the overall hotter hand, in addition to packing an equal or more explosive striking style as Njokuani, and with neither fighter using the ground game too much, I'm going to roll with the hotter hand in this fight, which in this case is Alvarez. Into the main card, 24-14 Edson Barboza aims to add to his legacy against 15-3 Esteban Hill Gringo Ribovics. Ribovics is 10 years younger at 30, 1 inch shorter with 6 inches of reach heading towards Barboza. Barboza has been around for about 15 years now, and through it all, he's been a pure-blooded striker. As of recent, he has been a bit streakier and more so a grinder in turn with some finishing touch. 4.14 to 4.68, speaking a bit to that recent streakiness and inability to pull away as often now. Still has power and explosiveness, but is able to be matched a bit more. There is a 0.43 takedown average that functions almost an entirely matchup or situational piece, with only one of his last 4 fights seeing a takedown landed. Ribovics is of a similar feather, with some finishability but a tendency to grind as of late. A 7.27 to 5.83 in the numbers, speaking to his ability to push a hell of a pace and never really fall behind. Only one of his UFC fights seeing him be behind in the numbers. There is some KO power and explosiveness, but it seems that he isn't always able to draw it out. Additionally, 0.35 takedown average that is entirely situational, his last takedown actually coming in 2023. The favorite by a fairly solid margin is Ribovics, and while I really wanted to pick Barboza, blatant favoritism mostly, Ribovics ends up looking better in this fight. Multiple fights they've been able to manage over 3 rounds, avoiding an excess of damage coming back his way while racking up totals. And while Barboza hasn't been bad, he struggled with pace in some of those fights, and that's something Ribovics seems to do really well with, is pouring that pace on over the rounds. Could Barboza land a KO blow? Yes. Could Barboza slow this fight down? Theoretically, yes, but I'm more inclined to lean with Ribovics, who's been fighting this style with a bit more success more recently, compared to the streakier as of recent Barboza. 9-1-1 Mansour Abdul-Malik hunts for the quick rebound against the 16-8 Dutson Stoltzfus. Abdul-Malik is 6 years younger, 3 or 2 inches taller, with 5 inches of reach, also rolling his way. Abdul-Malik is a finisher able to end the fight in a blink. Striking does seem to be the focus of his game, with 7 career KO wins and 3 of his 4 UFC wins also coming that way. Does carry a 3.28 to 4.49 on the striking, speaking to some reliance on power and a willingness to exchange. Obviously, this can backfire. He does also carry a 1.65 takedown average, with takedowns in 3 of his fights for varying chunks of control time. Does also have a submission win and ability, but with only 1 attempted and landed, I'm unsure if he uses takedowns to go into submissions. Stoltzfus looks to be a killer-be-killed fighter with heavy hands and an ever-present takedown game. 3.30 to 3.23 in the striking, speaking to how he uses the takedowns to slow his opponent down and get his game working. Doesn't tend to pull away much in the numbers, meaning there's some reliance on power to even the odds. In the takedown game, he rolls with a 2.08, showing his consistent use and importance to his game plan. Vegas likes Abdul-Malik in this fight by a decent margin, and I will be agreeing. Both fighters have a KO touch, which does mean there's a shot. But I think for every strength Stoltzfus has, Abdul-Malik just meets him there and has the ability to exceed him. He's taken it to the ground and found submission, which can counter a pretty big part of Stoltzfus' game, while having the power to match on the feet. I think in the end, more of those boxes end up ticked in favor of Abdul-Malik than they do Stoltzfus. Just seems to have an answer or a possible counter to a lot of what Stoltzfus uses to win his fights. Co-main event in the women's strawweight title. 16-5 Mackenzie Dern aims for her first title defense against the 17-8 Jillian the Savage Robertson. Robertson is 2 years younger, inch taller, with a dead draw in reach. Dern is a well-rounded grinder with some looming submission ability, a 0.93 takedown average, speaking to the consistent appearance in her fights and the importance to her game plan. With it, she's able to slow both her opponents down and rack up control time. Does seem to be able to work out of position to survive her opponent's ground game, and moving to the striking, she carries a grappler standard 3.47 to 3.93, being willing to endure shots to get the fight to the ground or close distance. She is able to pull away and deal damage, but it all relies on her ground game. Robertson is a similar style stylistically, but does have a bit more of a finish touch. 2.76 takedown average, highlighting a bit more of an aggressive pace with the takedowns, with generally more submissions attempted. She can be controlled on the ground, but has been able to push the pace enough to keep herself in that driver's seat. On the feet, she works grappler standard, 271 to 2.86, highlighting the reliance on the ground game to equalize a good amount of her opponent's advantage. Vegas is giving the nod to Dern, but does have it decently close overall. And honestly, I think I'm going to take a shot here and I'm going to pick Robertson. My main logic is that Robertson has the ability to take control quickly and avoid Dern's ability to fight from her back. And we have seen Dern struggle when control is taken from her. I do think Dern can take control of this fight as well, also having a better striking numbers overall, if not that KO power. And honestly, this fight is kind of living based on who's able to take control early or take it back quickly enough. Because I think both fighters have the ability to put the other in the hole early and take the fight the distance, or find a submission or find a KO. I'm kind of banking on Robertson with generally the more aggressive takedowns and pushing that aggressive takedown pace, being able to catch Dern either early in the fight or early in each round to give her the advantage and wear Dern down. I don't know if the fight will go that way. It could go a dozen different ways given how these people fight, but I do think Robertson has a skill set and style that can catch Dern early and put her in a hole she has to fight back from, or wear her down enough that fighting back isn't an option. And for the main event and the welterweight title, the champion, 28-1, Islam Makhachev, and it's for defense number 6 against the 17-1, the future, Ian Machado Garry. Garry is 6 years younger, with 5 inches of height heading his way, as well as 4 inches of reach. Makhachev is a grappler through and through. 3.10 takedown average, where he smothers his opponent's offense while setting up an incredibly effective submission game. 3 of his last 4 wins coming by submission. Does always tend to lead the action, with his last time taken down coming in 2021. He also is an effective striker, though he does like to work slowly. 2.45 to 1.45, with some decent power, though a lot of it seems to be more so based on timing. He can be outpaced on his feet, but his ground game will always keep him in a fight and keep everything close. Garry is more of a grinder, working effective striking and a solid ground game. Starting with the striking, it's a 4.78 to a 2.86, speaking to a decent pace and the ability to minimize damage coming back. Not a consistent KO artist, but he has landed some in the past. 2023. Now the ground game is a fairly reliable piece, a 0.92 average, working as an effective method to slow the fight down and letting Garry rack his offense up. Now here, the favorite is Makhachev, and I will agree. Part of me wanted to pick Garry because he's really not dead in the water. He has a skill set capable of competing and has a KO touch, so everything's in the realm of possibility. But Makhachev's takedown game is incredibly dangerous and very relentless, and Garry has been taken down for large chunks of control time. Now, theoretically, he could keep it standing, but Makhachev isn't a complete slouch there either, being able to work the range well and endure damage coming back from fighters like Volkanovski and Poirier. And while I know Garry can grapple, he doesn't use it often, only landing takedowns in 4 of his 10 UFC wins. And this is a fight I feel almost has to go to the ground given Makhachev. And on the ground, I think Makhachev has a clear enough edge that Gary's going to have to fight to defend himself and won't be able to take an advantage there. And if Makhachev keeps you on the ground, he wears you down, and he takes the numbers advantage, the points advantage, and just wears you down. In the end, that's UFC 330, and it's a decent card. I think the undercard's a lot of heavy-handed fighters, if not the most impactful decisions coming from it, but those 2 title fights I think promise a lot. Ian Garry has a huge chance here. If he's able to rise above my expectations, it'll be a major upset. I think Robertson-Dern's a really good fight. I think both fighters match up really well and are both going to challenge each other very well. I think UFC 30 will be a pretty good card overall. I think we'll definitely see some knockouts. We'll see some bloodbaths. Those 2 title fights, though, really have my attention. But in the end, this has been State of the Division. This has been UFC 330. Let me know what you think, what you thought. Leave a comment, leave a like, and have a good fight.